Emily Carter had never been one to seek excitement. Her life in Willow Creek was orderly, predictable, and quiet. She rose early each morning, brewed a cup of coffee, and read the daily news at her small kitchen table. She taught middle school English, grading papers with a meticulous hand and a quiet determination that few noticed but everyone relied upon. Her weekends were generally reserved for errands, grocery shopping, and long walks to clear her mind after a week spent corralling hormonal teenagers and managing endless lesson plans. Yet, on this particular Sunday morning, something nudged her from her usual routine, a faint echo of laughter and barking carried by the crisp autumn air. The town's park, normally calm and peaceful, seemed alive with a rare energy. Emily, feeling a subtle pull she could not explain, wandered toward the sound. As she approached, she noticed a sizable crowd gathered near a cleared section of the park, shaded by towering oaks with leaves in varying shades of amber and crimson. Parents clutched the hands of their children, all craning to see over the heads of other onlookers. The smell of fresh grass mingled with the faint tang of pine, and Emily felt a sudden thrill of anticipation. There was something different in the air today, something electric. At the center of the gathering, Officer Ramirez stood tall, his uniform crisp and neat, his posture exuding authority. Beside him, a large German shepherd with striking amber eyes moved with fluid precision. The dog's sleek coat gleamed in the morning sun as he executed a series of disciplined maneuvers. Emily noticed how the crowd responded with polite applause after every command, but their admiration seemed half-hearted compared to the respect and awe she felt. There was something about this dog, something in the way he held himself, the calm intelligence behind his gaze, that drew her in. His name was Coda, a name she learned moments later, and he was unlike any dog Emily had ever encountered. Emily edged closer, careful not to jostle anyone or interrupt the demonstration. She could feel the tension of the crowd, the mixture of excitement and controlled chaos as children chattered, dogs barked from the periphery, and Officer Ramirez guided Coda through complex obedience drills. The dog leaped over obstacles, weaved between cones, and retrieved objects with flawless timing. Emily marveled at the coordination, the trust between handler and dog. She could see it in every gesture. Coda's eyes never left Ramirez's face, every movement fluid, almost as if they shared a silent conversation invisible to the rest of the world. Yet despite her admiration for Ramirez and Coda, Emily felt a strange pull, an unexplainable tug that led her forward. She couldn't articulate why, only that she felt compelled to approach the dog. There was a magnetic quality about Coda, something deep, something instinctual. She slowed her pace, careful to keep her movements deliberate, and eventually found a place at the front of the crowd where she could see clearly without stepping onto the demonstration field. The sun glinted off the dew-covered grass, and the gentle rustle of the leaves in the wind seemed to echo the rhythm of her own heartbeat, fast, anticipatory, yet oddly calm. The demonstration continued, with Coda executing a series of jumps over hurdles and under bars with precise timing. Emily's eyes followed every movement, noting the sharp, almost uncanny intelligence in his gaze. She found herself unconsciously mimicking the gestures of the dog's handler, tilting her head when he tilted his, feeling a strange resonance. Children laughed as Coda barked in triumph after successfully completing a particularly difficult sequence, and Emily smiled softly, feeling a warmth that was part amusement, part fascination. There was something about this dog, something that felt familiar in a way she couldn't immediately place. Then, without warning, Emily felt the sudden urge to speak. It was not a decision, not a conscious thought, but a compulsion she could not ignore. She lifted her hand and pointed toward Coda. Her finger wavered for a fraction of a second, hesitant, before she extended it fully. "Sit," she whispered, almost to herself, a word she had not thought of in years. The word left her lips softly, carried on the cool morning air, and immediately something remarkable happened. Coda stopped mid-leap. His hind legs, suspended in the air just seconds before, planted firmly on the ground. His ears perked, his head tilted, and his eyes locked onto Emily. The crowd gasped collectively, a wave of astonishment washing over the observers. Children squealed in surprise and parents exchanged puzzled glances. Officer Ramirez froze, his hand halfway through signaling another command. "Coda," he called, his voice sharp, demanding, but the dog did not move. Instead, he remained rooted in place, his gaze unwavering, his body tense yet perfectly still, focused entirely on Emily. Emily's heart raced, a mixture of fear, excitement, and disbelief flooding her senses. She had not expected anything to happen, not like this. Her eyes darted to Officer Ramirez, whose face had gone pale, eyes wide with confusion. The crowd murmured, whispers spreading like wildfire. Did she just? How is that possible? Is the dog broken? Emily opened her mouth to explain that she had said nothing unusual, that it was just an instinctive word that had popped into her head, but the words faltered. There was a surreal quality to the moment, a weight of expectation pressing on her chest. Coda remained still, waiting, as though he understood her in a way no one else could. The silence stretched for long seconds, the kind of tense pause that seems to elongate time itself. Emily felt every heartbeat echoing in her ears, every breath a reminder that she was standing on the edge of something extraordinary. The crowd's murmurs faded into background noise as Emily focused on the dog, realizing she was experiencing a connection unlike any she had ever known. There was recognition in Coda's eyes, something primal and deep, as if he remembered her from another time, another place. Emily shivered, both unnerved and exhilarated by the sudden intimacy of the encounter. Officer Ramirez approached cautiously, his steps measured. "Ma'am, did you just say a command to him?" His voice was a mixture of disbelief and professional curiosity. Emily nodded slowly, still caught in the strange magnetism of Coda's gaze. I just said sit," she admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ramirez's brow furrowed. "He doesn't respond to anyone but me," he said, more to himself than to her. "Not anyone." Emily shook her head, unsure how to explain something she herself did not understand. The dog's unwavering focus left her feeling both empowered and profoundly vulnerable. The crowd leaned in, sensing the tension, drawn to the inexplicable bond forming before their eyes. Parents nudged children closer, cameras clicked, and a few brave onlookers whispered theories about trained behavior, coincidence, or even a fluke. Emily, meanwhile, felt a strange calm settle over her. She realized that in pointing at the dog and speaking, she had stumbled into an encounter that would forever alter her perception of the ordinary. Something had shifted in Coda, in herself, and perhaps even in the quiet rhythm of Willow Creek that morning. As the demonstration slowly resumed, Emily remained rooted in place, her eyes never leaving the dog. She felt a pull, a silent beckoning that promised something greater lay ahead. Coda's ears twitched, his tail swaying ever so slightly, as though acknowledging her presence with a quiet, unspoken agreement. Emily's pulse steadied as she took a deep breath, sensing that this was only the beginning, an opening chapter to a story that no one, least of all her, could have predicted. By the time Emily walked away from the park that morning, her mind raced with questions. What had just happened? How had she triggered such an immediate response from a dog trained to obey only its handler? And most importantly, what did it mean? Emily could not know that the answer to these questions would draw her into a journey of unexpected heroism, mystery, and connection. One where she would discover abilities she never imagined she possessed, and a bond with a police dog that no one else could replicate. That Sunday, in a small town park with sunlight glinting through autumn leaves, a quiet schoolteacher took the first step into an extraordinary adventure. A simple point and a whispered word had opened a door. And beyond it, both Emily and Coda were about to discover a world in which ordinary rules no longer applied. The air in the park had grown unusually still. What had begun as a lively Sunday demonstration now felt charged with an inexplicable tension. The crowd's murmurs had fallen into a near hush, all eyes fixed on the unusual scene unfolding before them. Coda, the police dog renowned for flawless obedience and precision, remained frozen in place, his amber eyes locked on Emily Carter. Not even Officer Ramirez's commanding voice could coax him to move. The dog's body was rigid but calm, like a predator ready to spring, but restrained by some invisible leash of focus. Emily felt her heartbeat hammering in her chest. Every instinct screamed at her to step back, to release the command she hadn't intended to give. Yet the pull she felt toward the dog, the inexplicable magnetic connection, kept her rooted in place. She did not understand why the dog had responded to her at all. She had said nothing extraordinary, no special words or training techniques, just the simplest term her grandfather had once used with his own dogs when she was a child. And yet here was Coda, a fully trained police dog, treating her words as if they were the only instructions he had ever needed. Officer Ramirez took a careful step toward her, his hand raised as if to signal reassurance but also caution. His eyes scanned the crowd, gauging reactions, and then returned to the dog. "Coda, heel," he commanded sharply, his voice full of authority. Coda's legs twitched slightly, but he remained unmoving, eyes never leaving Emily's face. Ramirez swallowed hard, visibly struggling to maintain control of the situation. The last thing he expected on a busy demonstration day was for a civilian, a stranger to the dog, to wield such power over his trained partner. "Did he just obey you?" a voice from the crowd asked nervously. A few parents whispered among themselves, unsure whether this was a trick, a miracle, or some sort of accident. Emily shook her head, bewildered. "I don't know," she admitted softly. I just said it." Her fingers were still raised, pointing toward the dog, and she felt a strange tremor pass through her body, part fear, part exhilaration. She had no idea what she was doing or why, yet the connection with Coda was undeniable. Coda's ears twitched at the faintest sound of her voice. Emily noticed the way his head tilted ever so slightly, a gesture that seemed almost intelligent in its deliberation. He was waiting, not out of obedience, but as if he trusted her judgment. Emily's mind raced. Could it be that she had somehow triggered a memory, some instinct buried deep in Coda's psyche? She had never handled a police dog in her life. She had never even owned a dog with the discipline of Coda. Yet here he was, waiting for guidance from her, completely ignoring the professional commands from the very person who had trained him for years. Officer Ramirez exhaled sharply, tension etched on his face. He had seen Coda respond to distractions before, children screaming, other animals running loose, but never like this. The dog's focus was absolute, unwavering. Ramirez cautiously lowered his hand but remained vigilant, unsure if this could be a fluke or something more. The crowd's whispers intensified, curiosity transforming into fascination. Every eye was glued to Emily, the quiet schoolteacher who now held the attention of both a remarkable police dog and an entire town. Emily tried to steady her voice, feeling an odd sense of responsibility. She took a step closer to Coda, unsure of what might happen next. "Down," she whispered almost instinctively. Coda's muscles relaxed, and he lowered himself into a perfect lying position, his eyes still fixed intently on her. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. Children squealed, some pressing closer to their parents' knees, while adults exchanged incredulous glances. Officer Ramirez's jaw had gone slack, a mixture of amazement and disbelief frozen on his face. "Emily," he began cautiously, using her name for the first time since she had arrived. "How are you doing this?" Emily blinked. She had only just introduced herself in brief moments after stepping into the crowd, and now her name seemed to hang in the air like a tangible weight. I really don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly, betraying both fear and excitement. She could feel the sweat beading on her forehead, not from exertion, but from the intensity of the moment. Every instinct in her body screamed that she had stumbled into something extraordinary, and that this day would mark the beginning of a story she could not have imagined. The crowd began to murmur again, curiosity swelling into fascination. Parents whispered to their children, pointing out the teacher who had somehow controlled a dog trained to respond only to a professional. Some muttered about luck or coincidence, while others speculated on hidden talent or even something more mystical. Emily, meanwhile, felt a strange warmth spread through her chest, a blend of fear, disbelief, and excitement. She couldn't explain why Koda was responding to her, yet every fiber of his body seemed attuned to her presence. Then, almost imperceptibly, Koda lifted his head and moved toward her, each step deliberate and measured. Emily held her ground, stunned. Her mind raced with questions. Was the dog sensing her emotions? Was it some deep memory, perhaps a faint echo of commands used long ago, though she had never interacted with him before? She felt both nervous and awed, the two emotions mingling into something electric. Officer Ramirez remained close, his posture protective yet uncertain. He had trained dogs for years, and yet nothing had prepared him for this. The park seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind stilled, leaves hanging motionless in the air. Emily's heart pounded as Koda stopped mere feet from her, eyes locked onto hers. He lowered his body slightly, signaling a readiness to follow whatever direction she might give. Emily's mind flashed back to her grandfather's stories of European dog training, techniques he had taught her as a child. She had forgotten most of them, tucked away in the quiet recesses of memory, but a few simple commands still lingered. She whispered another word almost reflexively, "Heel." To her astonishment, Koda pivoted smoothly, trotting obediently beside her as if she were his handler. Officer Ramirez's face shifted through a kaleidoscope of emotions: disbelief, awe, concern, and a cautious admiration. The crowd erupted in quiet exclamations, unable to fully comprehend what they were witnessing. Emily could feel their eyes on her, but strangely she felt calm, almost serene. Koda's presence was grounding, and despite the chaos around her, the connection they shared created a bubble of clarity, a moment suspended in time. Some of the onlookers began to cheer softly, applauding the bond they could sense but not understand. Others whispered urgently, speculating whether this was a trick, a fluke, or some hidden ability Emily possessed. Yet she could not articulate why it was happening. She had only reacted, instinctively pointing and speaking, and now she was part of a phenomenon that defied explanation. Even as Koda followed her commands with precision, Emily felt the thrill of discovery, of encountering a world just slightly beyond the ordinary. Officer Ramirez finally spoke again, his voice measured but laced with astonishment. "This has never happened before. Koda doesn't respond to anyone else like this. How, why?" Emily shook her head, her mind as much in awe as anyone else's. "I honestly don't know," she said. "I've never trained a dog like this. I just spoke." She felt her cheeks warm as all eyes turned toward her. The enormity of the moment began to sink in. What she had done was no small feat. She had connected with a creature trained to obey only a single person, unlocking something hidden and extraordinary. Koda, sensing her confidence, continued to execute every simple command with perfect obedience. Sit, stay, heel. Each one followed with an almost reverential precision. The crowd leaned forward, captivated. The ordinary Sunday demonstration transformed into something almost magical. Emily realized that this dog, through some unfathomable coincidence or fate, had responded to her in a way no one else had ever achieved. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could it be training, intuition, or a mysterious resonance buried in Koda's past? She didn't know, and yet it didn't matter. The connection was real and it was happening. By the time the demonstration concluded, Emily stood slightly apart from the crowd, still in awe of what had just occurred. Officer Ramirez approached her cautiously, a mixture of respect and curiosity in his eyes. "I need to know, how did you do that?" he asked. Emily laughed softly, nervously, unsure how to answer. I really don't know," she said. She realized, as the crowd began to disperse and normal life resumed, that she had witnessed something rare, something that would haunt her thoughts for days to come. Koda, obedient and alert, trotted back to his handler but cast one last glance at Emily before sitting by Ramirez's side. The connection lingered, subtle but undeniable, as though a bridge had been built between the two, a bridge no one else could cross. Emily walked home that afternoon with her mind racing, realizing that her quiet, ordinary life in Willow Creek had just shifted. A simple word, a single gesture, and an extraordinary dog had changed the course of her day, and perhaps the days yet to come. That Sunday, the park returned to its usual calm, but Emily's world would never be the same. Something extraordinary had happened, a moment suspended in disbelief and wonder, a moment that promised that the ordinary could sometimes give way to the extraordinary. She had pointed at the dog and spoken, and in doing so, she had opened the first page of a story she had never expected to be part of. The moment hung suspended in the crisp morning air, stretched thin by disbelief and tension. The crowd remained frozen, a collective breath held as if the world had stopped in honor of what was happening. Coda, the police dog who had flawlessly executed countless training routines under Officer Ramirez's careful guidance, remained entirely focused on Emily. Every muscle in his body was alert, yet calm, a combination of power and restraint that only a highly trained dog could display. He did not shift his gaze, did not blink more than necessary, as though the entire world had narrowed to the figure of the schoolteacher before him. Emily felt a strange mixture of awe and anxiety. Her finger was still extended, pointing toward Coda almost instinctively, yet she barely moved. Her heart raced, a fluttering drumbeat in her chest, and her palms were damp with nervous anticipation. She had never felt a bond like this with an animal in her life, not even with her childhood dog, Max, who had been her constant companion for years. This was different. It was as though she could sense Coda's thoughts, not in words, but in intent and energy. She realized with a shiver that he was waiting for her guidance in a way no dog had ever waited before. Officer Ramirez's face was a canvas of incredulity and concern. He knelt slightly beside Coda, his hands hovering over the dog's shoulders, as if ready to intervene at the slightest misstep. "Coda, heel," he commanded again, his tone firmer, tinged with the controlled frustration of a man trained to maintain order. But Coda remained unmoved, pivoting slightly only to face Emily, ignoring Ramirez's authority entirely. The officer's jaw tightened, and he cast a quick glance toward the crowd, who were now leaning forward, whispers buzzing like a swarm. Some of them were fascinated, others skeptical, and a few appeared genuinely fearful of the inexplicable scene before them. Emily opened her mouth to speak again, unsure what to say. Her instincts told her to guide the dog, yet fear rooted her in place. She was acutely aware of every eye on her, the parents, the children, the casual onlookers who had stumbled upon the demonstration, each person waiting, silently questioning, silently judging. For a moment she felt exposed, vulnerable, as if standing on the stage of a theater she hadn't agreed to perform on. Yet there was also an exhilarating power in the awareness that Coda trusted her completely, that his unwavering focus was a testament to a connection she couldn't yet explain. A little boy tugged at his mother's sleeve, pointing at Emily and whispering in awe, "Mom, she's talking to the dog and he's listening." The mother hushed him quickly, but her wide eyes betrayed the same astonishment Emily felt creeping through the crowd. People whispered to each other, speculation swirling. "Is it a trick?" one woman asked. "Has she trained him secretly?" Another man shook his head, muttering, "That's impossible, he obeys only Ramirez." Emily, standing in the center of this unintentional spectacle, felt a growing sense of responsibility. She hadn't meant to cause a scene, but now she couldn't turn away. The stillness of the park was broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the distant chirping of birds, but even nature seemed to pause in recognition of the moment. Emily inhaled deeply, feeling the crisp autumn air fill her lungs as she calmed herself. She focused on Coda, noting the subtle twitch of his ears and the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was as if he was assessing her, waiting for a clear direction, trusting her instinctively despite the fact that she had no professional training. She marveled at the profundity of the connection, the inexplicable bond that had formed in a single instant. Officer Ramirez finally took a measured step closer, his voice quieter now, less commanding, more curious. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "you need to understand Coda has never done this. He doesn't respond to anyone like this." Emily met his gaze, her own eyes wide, reflecting the same disbelief she saw mirrored in his expression. I honestly don't know why," she whispered. Her voice trembled slightly, a combination of nervousness and the thrill of discovery. "I didn't do anything. I just said the word," and he responded. Ramirez's brow furrowed deeper, his professional instincts battling with the surreal reality he was witnessing. The crowd, sensing the tension, began to murmur again, though this time in hushed tones of awe rather than curiosity. Children's eyes widened as they watched the dog, this powerful, disciplined creature, respond only to Emily. Some parents held their children close, whispering reassurances, while others pulled out phones, recording every moment. The whispers were a mixture of skepticism, wonder, and outright disbelief. Emily could feel the collective gaze pressing upon her, yet a calm center seemed to radiate from Coda, as if reminding her that he trusted her, and that nothing could go wrong if she remained steady. Emily's thoughts flickered back to her grandfather, who had spent years training dogs in Europe. She remembered the careful precision of his commands, the patience he instilled in each animal, and the way he seemed to communicate with them almost telepathically. Could this be connected? She had never trained a dog formally, yet some fragment of that knowledge, tucked away in memory, had emerged instinctively. Coda's response was not merely obedience, it was recognition, understanding, and trust. Emily realized that she was witnessing something extraordinary, a moment in which past knowledge, instinct, and fate converged in a tangible, undeniable way. A hush settled over the crowd as Emily gently extended her hand toward Coda. "Come," she said softly, not commanding but inviting. Coda rose to his feet with a fluid grace, trotting over to her without hesitation. His movements were deliberate, controlled, and full of purpose. Emily's pulse quickened as she took a step back, testing the invisible bond. He followed her effortlessly, side by side, a picture of perfect synchronization that drew audible gasps from the spectators. Children whispered in awe, and even the adults seemed to forget themselves, caught entirely by the inexplicable scene before them. Officer Ramirez's expression shifted from disbelief to cautious intrigue. He had trained Coda for years, taught him every command, every subtle cue, every precise motion. Yet here was a stranger, a civilian eliciting responses that defied every law of training he had ever known. His professional instincts urged him to intervene, to regain control, but something in the air held him back. He watched, fascinated and unnerved, as Coda responded to Emily's guidance with flawless execution. It was not a performance, it was real and it was undeniable. Emily felt the weight of the moment, a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. She had no idea why Coda obeyed her, yet the connection was profound, almost electric. Every step, every gaze, every subtle movement between them was laden with meaning. She felt an unspoken communication passing silently between human and canine, a dialogue that transcended words. The crowd leaned in, sensing the gravity of the bond, even if they could not fully understand it. Emily realized she was part of something remarkable, something that would linger in memory long after the park returned to its ordinary rhythm. The tension of the moment stretched, a quiet pressure building in the air. Emily, sensing the expectation around her, took a deep breath. "Stay," she whispered, and Coda froze, ears erect, body poised, ready to follow whatever direction she offered next. The crowd collectively exhaled, as if releasing a held breath. Officer Ramirez nodded slightly, a silent acknowledgement of the unprecedented connection unfolding before him. Emily felt a thrill course through her, not from power or control, but from understanding. An understanding that, in this moment, she had tapped into something extraordinary, something hidden beneath the surface of ordinary life. Time seemed to suspend itself, the ordinary sounds of the park, the distant honk of a car, children laughing, dogs barking, falling away into background noise. All that mattered was the quiet, intense focus shared between Emily and Coda. She realized that she could not explain it rationally, could not justify it to anyone, yet the experience was as real as the cool grass beneath her feet. Every instinct, every memory, every word from her grandfather that had resurfaced instinctively contributed to a perfect alignment of understanding. Finally, Officer Ramirez spoke again, his voice low, reverent even. This has never happened before. Coda doesn't respond like this to anyone. How? He trailed off, shaking his head slightly, unable to articulate what he had just witnessed. Emily met his gaze, her own mind racing. She could feel the enormity of the moment settling over her, a quiet acknowledgement that something extraordinary had been set in motion. She had no answers, only a sense of wonder and the growing certainty that this day would mark a profound turning point, not just for herself, but for Coda, and perhaps for everyone present. The crowd began to slowly disperse, still murmuring in astonishment, yet Emily remained where she was, rooted by a mixture of awe, curiosity, and a deep, inexplicable connection. Coda, sensing the end of the demonstration but not wanting to break the bond, stayed close, tail swaying gently, eyes fixed on her. Emily exhaled, the tension in her body melting into a mixture of relief and exhilaration. She realized that something had shifted, something irreversible. A single word, a simple gesture, had opened a door to a connection no one could have anticipated. That morning in Willow Creek Park, Emily Carter discovered that ordinary life could hold extraordinary surprises. She had spoken to a police dog in a moment of instinct, and in doing so, had awakened a connection that defied logic, training, and expectation. The unease of silence had transformed into quiet wonder, leaving all who witnessed it with a lingering sense of possibility, and understanding that sometimes the smallest moments could herald the most remarkable beginnings. The park slowly returned to its usual rhythm, though an almost tangible ripple of disbelief lingered in the air. Children's laughter returned in bursts, dogs barked playfully in the distance, and a few parents tried to coax their young ones away from the demonstration area. Yet for Emily Carter, the quiet and order she had always known seemed to have shifted. The connection with Coda, that powerful, disciplined German shepherd, refused to dissolve. Every instinct she possessed told her that this was more than a coincidence. Something deep and inexplicable had passed between them, and she felt compelled to understand it. Emily stepped aside, letting Officer Ramirez retrieve Coda and resume his demonstration for the remaining onlookers. Yet Coda's amber eyes frequently flicked back to her, alert and attentive, as though asking silently for guidance or reassurance. Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. This wasn't just obedience, it was recognition. Coda responded to her not because he was trained to obey, but because he understood in some instinctive, inexplicable way that she belonged in this moment with him. She could sense the dog's thought patterns, the subtle energy of his movements, and the precision in his posture. Officer Ramirez knelt beside Coda, whispering softly, clearly trying to regain the dog's focus. "Good boy, Coda," he murmured, running a hand down the animal's spine. The dog obeyed his touch but continued to glance toward Emily periodically, as if comparing memories, experiences, or perhaps instincts she could not yet comprehend. Emily felt her chest tighten. She had never considered herself extraordinary, nor had she expected to hold such sway over a creature trained for precision and discipline. Yet here she was, both captivated and empowered by a connection that felt ancient, primal, and undeniable. She replayed the sequence of events in her mind, analyzing every word, every gesture. When she had first pointed and whispered, "Sit," Coda had halted mid-leap, an almost imperceptible pause that transformed into unwavering attention. Then when she softly said, "Heel," the dog had pivoted seamlessly to follow her. Emily remembered how her grandfather had trained dogs when she was a child, teaching subtle cues and emphasizing trust above all else. Perhaps some fragment of those lessons had survived in her memory, tucked away in her subconscious, only now to emerge under the perfect conditions. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Officer Ramirez approached Emily cautiously, still processing what had just occurred. His tone was low, controlled, yet laced with curiosity. "I need to understand," he said, his eyes scanning her face for answers that she did not yet have. "Coda has never done this with anyone else. How? Why?" Emily hesitated, searching for the right words. She could not explain it logically. She had said only words she had learned as a child, words meant for ordinary dog training, and yet Coda had responded with uncanny precision. She finally admitted, almost reluctantly, I really don't know. I just said them instinctively. Ramirez frowned, his professional skepticism struggling against the evidence before him. He had handled dozens of police dogs throughout his career, trained with experts across the country, yet nothing had prepared him for a civilian wielding such influence over a highly trained dog. He glanced at the crowd, now more relaxed but still whispering, and returned his gaze to Emily. "There's more to this than chance," he said, almost to himself. "Something unusual is happening here." Emily nodded quietly, feeling the truth of his words resonate deep within her. She stepped closer to Coda, who remained at Ramirez's side, though his attention seemed divided between the two humans. Emily bent slightly, allowing her hands to hover near the dog without touching him. "Stay," she whispered again. Coda's body tensed briefly, then settled immediately, obedient yet alert, as if he were aware of the weight of the moment. The clarity of this connection overwhelmed Emily. It was not merely obedience, but something deeper: recognition, understanding, and mutual awareness. The dog was not simply following commands. He was responding to intuition and instinct that she could not yet articulate. The realization stirred a memory from Emily's childhood, her grandfather's training methods, which had always emphasized not just obedience but empathy. "Dogs can sense more than we realize," he used to say. "They respond to energy, intent, and the truth in your voice." Emily now understood the meaning of his words in a visceral way. Coda was sensing her intent, her calm confidence, and her subconscious knowledge of commands. It was as if her grandfather's teachings had transcended time and circumstance, finding resonance in this extraordinary dog hundreds of miles from where she had learned them. Officer Ramirez, sensing the shift in Emily's demeanor, suggested they move Coda to a quieter area of the park. The two of them walked to a shaded corner, away from the lingering curiosity of the crowd. Emily's confidence grew as she spoke softly, testing her connection further. "Sit." Coda lowered himself immediately. "Down." He complied flawlessly. "Heel." He moved alongside her with precision and grace, responding to every nuanced command. Ramirez could hardly believe his eyes, and Emily felt a thrill unlike anything she had experienced before. This wasn't a trick. It was something real, a living, breathing testament to connection. As the morning unfolded, Emily began to notice subtleties in Coda's behavior that no one else seemed to perceive. The slight flick of his tail indicated curiosity rather than distraction. A tilt of his head revealed genuine engagement with her words, rather than passive compliance. Every micro-movement spoke volumes, conveying information about the dog's attention, emotion, and understanding. Emily marveled at the depth of their interaction. It was as if they shared a language composed of gestures, intent, and instinct, a language that existed beyond conventional training or explanation. Officer Ramirez watched closely, taking careful notes on Coda's responsiveness and behavior. He began to ask questions, probing Emily gently. "Did your grandfather teach you anything unusual?" he inquired. "Were there specific methods or commands he favored?" Emily shook her head. "Nothing that would explain this," she said softly. "He emphasized trust and intuition, but nothing that could account for a dog obeying me instantly like this." Ramirez nodded slowly, the wheels turning in his mind. "It's more than training," he murmured. "It's a connection, something instinctive." Emily felt a mixture of pride, astonishment, and apprehension. She was still a school teacher, accustomed to order and predictability, yet she had discovered an entirely new dimension to her abilities. The connection with Coda was not something she had sought, but it had found her. She realized that the world was far larger and more mysterious than she had imagined. This dog, trained for obedience and precision, had responded to her in ways that defied logic, science, and conventional understanding. And yet it was happening right here, in the quiet corner of Willow Creek Park. Time passed unnoticed as Emily continued to interact with Coda, each moment deepening their bond. She noticed the subtle feedback loops in his behavior, the way he anticipated her commands, adjusted his posture according to her energy, and even seemed to communicate with her in a way that transcended words. The connection felt symbiotic, as though they were two halves of a system newly awakened. Emily realized that this wasn't just a display of obedience. It was a revelation, a glimpse into the potential for communication and understanding between humans and animals at a level she had never imagined. Finally, Officer Ramirez spoke again, his tone quieter, almost reverent. "Emily, I think this is something special, something rare." Emily nodded, still absorbing the enormity of the situation. "I don't know what it means yet," she admitted, "but it feels right, like it was meant to happen." Ramirez studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Whatever this is, we need to explore it carefully. Coda trusts you in a way no other dog has ever trusted anyone outside of his training. That's remarkable." Emily smiled faintly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon her shoulders. As the crowd dissipated and the park returned to normalcy, Emily stood quietly, reflecting on the morning's events. She could still feel Coda's presence in a way that lingered in her mind, a subtle awareness that was almost physical. She realized that she had stumbled into a rare and profound connection, one that might redefine her understanding of animals, instinct, and perhaps even herself. The day had begun as an ordinary Sunday, but it had revealed something extraordinary, a bridge between human and canine, intuition and training, instinct and reason. Emily left the park that day with a mixture of wonder and anticipation. She understood that this connection was just the beginning, that it had the potential to lead to something much larger than she could yet comprehend. She had uncovered a hidden bond, a mysterious channel of communication that defied explanation and demanded exploration. Coda had become more than a police dog. He had become a partner in discovery, a living testament to the possibility of understanding beyond the ordinary limits of life. And as she walked home, the sun warm on her back and the leaves crunching underfoot, Emily felt a quiet certainty. Something extraordinary had been set in motion. The bond with Coda was real, and it was just the first step in a journey she could never have anticipated, but one that promised adventure, revelation, and perhaps even heroism. A simple gesture, a whispered word, and a shared moment had awakened something mysterious and powerful, a connection that no one could have predicted and no one would forget. The following week, Willow Creek seemed unchanged at first glance. Children still ran through the streets, dogs barked in the yards, and the small town carried on with its usual routines. Yet for Emily Carter, life had been subtly but irrevocably altered. The incident with Coda lingered in her mind like a vivid dream that refused to fade. Every thought seemed filtered through the lens of that extraordinary moment. The police dog who had obeyed her instinctively, the crowd that had watched in silent awe, and the overwhelming sensation that some hidden truth had been revealed. She felt compelled to understand, to dig deeper into the origins of this connection that had surfaced so suddenly. Emily returned to the park on a quiet afternoon, hopping to observe Coda in a neutral setting, away from the watchful eyes of the crowd. Officer Ramirez met her near the shaded corner where they had first tested her influence over the dog. His face, a mixture of professionalism and curiosity, betrayed the same wonder he had experienced that Sunday. "I wanted to see if this repeats under controlled conditions," he said, gesturing to Coda, who sat calmly at his side, ears twitching in anticipation. Emily nodded, a strange combination of excitement and apprehension tightening in her chest. "Let's try something simple," she suggested, her voice soft but deliberate. She extended her hand slightly and whispered the word she had used before. Coda's head lifted and his body immediately responded, lowering into a perfect sitting position. Emily's pulse quickened. The effect was just as profound as the first time. She glanced at Officer Ramirez, who was watching intently, recording every subtle reaction. "It's consistent," he murmured, almost to himself. "This isn't coincidence. It's something else entirely." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. She knew he was right, though neither of them yet understood the mechanism. As they continued, Emily noticed more patterns in Coda's behavior. Subtle changes in her tone, posture, and even breathing influenced his responses. It was as if he could read not only her words but the intention behind them, the unspoken cues that conveyed her confidence, hesitation, and focus. Emily realized that this was more than instinct or memory. It was a connection rooted in something deeper, something intangible. She could feel it, a quiet pulse of understanding flowing between them, as though Coda and she were communicating on a level beyond human comprehension. Officer Ramirez, still observing, finally spoke. "We need to consider history. Coda wasn't always in Willow Creek. He was trained for federal assignments, then reassigned here. His previous trainers, their techniques, maybe something left a mark we don't understand yet." Emily frowned thoughtfully. "Do you mean maybe I'm triggering a memory in him?" she asked. Ramirez nodded slowly, the gears of his mind turning. "It's possible. Dogs remember patterns, routines, even voices. But nothing explains why he would respond to a complete stranger with such precision. There's a missing piece here." Emily considered the idea seriously. Her grandfather had often told her that dogs had remarkable memories, sometimes remembering commands or patterns years after they were taught. Perhaps Coda's previous life, his rigorous federal training, had created a resonance that only the right conditions could awaken. Emily couldn't shake the notion that she had stumbled into a threshold of understanding, a point where instinct, memory, and connection intersected. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying. Determined to find answers, Emily asked Ramirez if she could review Coda's background files. The officer hesitated at first, concerned about security protocols, but then agreed. "We'll need to do this carefully," he warned. "Some of this information is sensitive, but if anyone can help make sense of what's happening, maybe you can." Emily nodded, her resolve firm. She didn't know exactly what she would find, but she knew she had to try. This connection demanded understanding, and she couldn't ignore it. Over the next few days, Emily combed through records, old training logs, and reports of Coda's previous assignments. She discovered a history that was far more complex than she could have imagined. Coda had been trained by a series of handlers who specialized in high-stakes operations, search and rescue missions, narcotics enforcement, and even tactical interventions in sensitive situations. Each handler had employed subtle cues, reinforced patterns, and commands that relied on a precise combination of voice, gesture, and presence. Emily began to notice overlaps between her grandfather's teaching techniques and the routines documented in Coda's files. The coincidences were striking, almost uncanny. One file caught her attention in particular. A report detailing Coda's brief assignment at a specialized canine training facility in Europe, coincidentally, the same region where her grandfather had spent decades training dogs in his youth. Emily's pulse quickened as she read the notes. The report mentioned a trainer using nonverbal cues and energy-based guidance that had significantly accelerated Coda's responsiveness. Could it be possible that her grandfather's techniques had somehow influenced this training indirectly? Emily couldn't explain it rationally, but the pattern was undeniable. A thread of connection, spanning continents and decades, had woven itself into the life of this remarkable dog. Officer Ramirez, reviewing the same files, finally spoke, his voice low with awe. "Emily, this isn't just coincidence. There's a history here, a lineage of training and instinct, and somehow you've tapped into it. Coda recognizes patterns you've internalized without even knowing it. It's as if the past and present converged in this moment." Emily exhaled, a mixture of relief and disbelief flooding her. She realized that what had seemed miraculous was rooted in reality, though reality itself had stretched into the extraordinary. This was more than a connection. It was the culmination of a hidden past revealing itself in the present. The pieces began to fall into place. Emily understood why Coda responded to her so intuitively. Her grandfather's methods, embedded deep in her subconscious, mirrored the cues that had been instilled in Coda years earlier. The dog was not obeying magic or accident. He was recognizing familiar patterns, trusting in the instincts and energies Emily naturally exuded. It was a revelation that left her both humbled and empowered. The mysterious bond was no longer purely mysterious. It had a lineage, a hidden past that bridged continents, trainers, and decades of disciplined canine instruction. Yet even with this revelation, questions remained. How had Emily's voice, her gesture, and her instinct triggered such a precise response in a dog she had never met? Was it purely subconscious mimicry of her grandfather's techniques, or was there something more, something intuitive, almost mystical in play? Emily couldn't answer that yet. She only knew that the connection was real, and that it had been awakened in a way that transcended conventional understanding. Determined to explore further, Emily arranged to meet with Ramirez and Coda the following weekend. She wanted to test her understanding of the connection, to see if she could predict and influence Coda's behavior with increasing subtlety. Ramirez agreed, intrigued by the possibility of studying this phenomenon scientifically, cautiously recording each interaction for analysis. As Emily and Coda trained together, she noticed a profound harmony. The dog seemed to anticipate her intentions even before she voiced them fully, responding not to commands alone, but to the energy she projected, the rhythm of her breathing, the alignment of her focus. Days turned into a week of observation and subtle experimentation. Each session revealed new layers of understanding, new depths to the bond they shared. Emily began to notice patterns in Coda's behavior that aligned perfectly with techniques her grandfather had taught her, techniques she had almost forgotten, but which now resonated with uncanny clarity. It became apparent that Coda's responsiveness was not merely a reflection of training. It was a living dialogue, an exchange of instinct and intuition that defied conventional explanation. By the end of the week, Emily realized that she had unlocked something extraordinary. She could guide Coda not only through basic commands but through complex instinctual behavior that required deep trust and mutual awareness. Officer Ramirez, observing from a distance, could hardly conceal his astonishment. "Emily," he said quietly, "what you've discovered, it's unprecedented. There's no manual for this. No protocol. It's a hidden past, a bridge to understanding something beyond training." Emily nodded, feeling the weight and wonder of his words settle in her chest. And as the sun dipped low over Willow Creek, casting long shadows across the park, Emily knew that the journey had only begun. The bond she had uncovered with Coda was a bridge to something larger, something profound. The hidden past had been revealed, but the mysteries it unlocked were far from fully understood. Together, Emily and Coda would explore the extraordinary potential of their connection, testing the limits of intuition, instinct, and trust. The revelation was only the beginning, an opening chapter to a story that promised adventure, danger, and discovery far beyond what Emily could have imagined. The calm that had settled over Willow Creek after the revelation of Coda's responsiveness to Emily was deceptive. The town, accustomed to small, predictable events, had no inkling that a subtle tension had begun to build beneath its ordinary surface. Emily, however, sensed it immediately. As she walked to the park that morning, Coda trotting loyally beside her, a prickling sensation traced her spine, an instinctive warning she could neither ignore nor explain. Something was coming, something that would challenge not only her bond with Coda, but her understanding of the delicate balance between control, trust, and danger. The park appeared serene, as if the extraordinary events of the previous week had been forgotten. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, scattering patterns of gold and green across the walking paths. Children played in the distance, their laughter echoing faintly, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension that clung to the air. Emily's eyes scanned the familiar landscape, noting the subtle shifts in shadows, the distant sounds that didn't belong, the way the wind carried an unfamiliar scent. Coda, alert and poised, mirrored her unease, his ears twitching toward sounds she couldn't immediately identify. Officer Ramirez had insisted on joining her today, citing caution and curiosity. He walked a few paces behind, his professional instincts on high alert. "Emily, I know you sense it too," he said quietly, keeping his voice low. "There's something off today. Coda's responding differently than usual, more tense, more aware. It's subtle, but it's there." Emily nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. She could feel the undercurrent of danger in a way that words could not fully convey. Koda's movements were fluid, precise, and measured, a silent warning that the dog perceived a threat long before they would encounter it. Emily tried to focus on the routine they had practiced for days, testing Koda's responsiveness with simple commands. "Sit," she whispered. Koda obeyed flawlessly. "Heel." Again, he moved alongside her without hesitation. But beneath the perfection of his obedience, a new tension lurked, a restless energy, an anticipation that something was approaching. Emily's instincts screamed at her to remain vigilant, to prepare for whatever lay beyond the ordinary calm of the park. She realized that their extraordinary connection, which had once seemed a source of wonder and empowerment, could now become the key to survival. They approached a secluded part of the park near the old abandoned storage shed. Emily had chosen this spot deliberately, away from the distractions of the main paths. The shadows of the surrounding trees stretched long, and the air was heavier here, filled with the subtle musk of damp earth and decaying leaves. Koda paused abruptly, his body stiffening, nose raised, ears forward. Emily stopped instantly, instinctively following the dog's lead. The silence that followed was thick and oppressive, as if the world itself had paused in anticipation. Officer Ramirez approached cautiously, hand hovering near Koda in case intervention became necessary. "Do you feel it?" he asked. Emily nodded, though her voice remained silent, the tension too potent for words. Koda shifted slightly, his muscles coiling as if ready to spring into action. Then, almost imperceptibly, a rustling sound came from behind the shed. Emily's breath caught in her throat. The noise was faint, deliberate, footsteps on gravel, careful and controlled, but with intent. Someone or something was approaching, and Koda's reaction confirmed her worst fears. "Stay close," Emily whispered, though Koda had already positioned himself slightly ahead, alert and protective. The connection between them pulsed stronger now, a silent understanding that danger required immediate attention. Emily could sense Koda's thoughts without the need for words: caution, readiness, focus. The dog was not merely obeying her. He was anticipating, analyzing, and preparing for potential threats. Emily's heart raced as she realized that the bond they shared was about to be tested, in a way neither of them had anticipated. From behind the shed emerged a man, tall and imposing, his features obscured by a hood pulled low over his face. He carried a small black case, and his movements were deliberate, measured. Emily's instincts screamed at her to react, but she held her ground, trusting the guidance of Koda. The dog's growl was low and steady, a warning that resonated deep in Emily's chest. The man froze, glancing at Koda with what seemed like recognition, though his eyes were hidden beneath shadow. He paused, then spoke in a voice both calm and menacing. "I've been looking for you, Emily." Words sent a chill through her. "Who are you?" she demanded, keeping her tone steady despite the rising fear. The man didn't answer immediately, studying both her and Koda with an unnerving intensity. Officer Ramirez stepped closer, protective yet unsure, his hand moving toward the radio at his belt. "Step away from her," he commanded, his voice firm but controlled. The man's gaze shifted to Ramirez, then back to Emily. "No," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt her yet. I need what she has." Emily's mind raced. What could this stranger possibly want from her? The connection she shared with Koda was extraordinary, yes, but how could it be valuable to someone else? The man's aura was unsettling, a mixture of calm calculation and underlying threat. Koda growled again, more forcefully this time, body taut and ready. Emily instinctively reached out, placing a hand gently on the dog's shoulder. "It's okay. We can handle this," she murmured, feeling the bond between them strengthen, the connection a shield against fear. The man finally stepped closer, revealing more of his face, pale, angular, with eyes that seemed to pierce through Emily's thoughts. "You don't understand," he said, voice low, urgent. "What you've discovered, it's not just a connection, it's a key, a bridge, and others will stop at nothing to control it." Emily's heart skipped a beat. The extraordinary bond she had shared with Koda, something she had thought of as a miracle, was now revealed as a potential target, something with significance far beyond her understanding. Officer Ramirez tensed, his instincts screaming at him to act, but Emily held up a hand. She needed to understand to gauge the threat before making any sudden moves. Coda's growl softened slightly under her touch, yet his body remained rigid, signaling vigilance. Emily realized that her connection with the dog was not just a tool for obedience or training. It was a lifeline, a means of survival, and perhaps the only way to navigate the danger that now approached. The man shifted the case slightly in his hands. "Inside this," he said, voice careful, "is evidence of what you can do, but it's only the beginning. There are organizations, people who want to harness this ability for their own purposes. They've been searching for someone like you, someone with the natural affinity to unlock a dog's instincts beyond training. And now, they know you exist." Emily felt the weight of his words settle over her like a heavy cloak. The world she had known, the quiet, predictable life of Willow Creek had vanished. In its place was danger, intrigue, and the possibility of forces that could threaten not just her bond with Coda, but their very lives. Coda's ears flicked, his body still tense, yet his eyes met Emily's with unwavering trust. The dog's connection with her was more than instinct now. It was a partnership, a lifeline. Emily realized that whatever lay ahead, she and Coda would face it together, navigating threats that neither could fully predict. She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the bond that had brought them this far. "I don't know what you want from me," she said finally, "but I won't let anyone take this from us." The man tilted his head slightly, a faint smile brushing his lips. "That's what makes you special," he said, turning to retreat slowly, disappearing back toward the shadows of the park. "But be warned, they will come. And when they do, it won't be so easy." Emily's heart pounded as he vanished, leaving a charged silence behind. She knelt beside Coda, running a hand through his fur. "We have to be ready," she whispered. The dog nudged her hand with his nose, a silent acknowledgement, and Emily knew without a doubt that their extraordinary connection would be tested in ways they had never imagined. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the park. Emily and Coda walked back toward the edge of Willow Creek, their minds alert, senses heightened, and hearts brimming with anticipation. Officer Ramirez fell into step beside them, both a protector and a witness to the unfolding story. The ordinary world had been stripped away, replaced by a reality where intuition, instinct, and hidden dangers would dictate every decision. Emily knew that this was just the beginning. Danger had arrived, and the extraordinary bond with Coda was now both their shield and their weapon. The night settled over Willow Creek like a velvet cloak, thick and impenetrable, yet Emily Carter's mind refused to rest. The encounter with the hooded stranger still haunted her thoughts, the words he had spoken, the subtle menace in his tone, and the ominous promise that others would come searching for her connection with Coda. She paced the small confines of her living room, the shadows from the streetlights outside casting long, shifting patterns across the walls. Coda sat alert by her side, ears twitching at every creak of the house, eyes glowing with awareness in the dim light. Emily could feel the bond with Coda pulsing stronger than ever, as if the dog sensed the heightened tension in her own mind. It was no longer enough to test commands or practice simple routines. They had entered a new stage, a phase of survival, preparation, and strategic response. She realized that their connection was both a gift and a responsibility. Whoever was coming would not be ordinary. They would be calculated, relentless, and dangerous. And Coda, as extraordinary as he was, could not face them alone. Officer Ramirez arrived shortly after midnight, careful to remain silent, his vehicle idling outside Emily's house. He had called her earlier, urging caution, but Emily insisted that she needed a strategy. The encounter with the hooded man had made one thing clear. Willow Creek, usually safe and predictable, had become the center of a hidden storm. Ramirez carried a small notebook filled with observations from the park, noting every nuance of Coda's behavior and every reaction Emily displayed. "We need a plan," he said softly, glancing at the dog. "They know you exist. They know what you can do. They're not going to stop until they find a way to exploit it." Emily nodded, her mind racing through possibilities. "We need to anticipate them," she said, Coda and we have to be ready for anything." She ran her hands along the dog's back, feeling the ripple of his muscles, the latent power beneath the calm surface. "He can sense things before we see them," she continued, "but we have to guide him, keep him focused. If we lose control, even for a second, it could be catastrophic." Ramirez's brow furrowed. He had trained dogs for years, faced dangerous criminals, and survived tense standoffs, but the magnitude of this situation left him unsettled. "You really think your connection with him can outmatch trained adversaries?" he asked, doubt lingering in his voice. Emily hesitated for a moment. She knew instinctively that Coda's trust and responsiveness could surpass human comprehension, yet she also understood the stakes. "I don't know if it's enough," she admitted, "but it's the only advantage we have, and I trust him more than anyone else. He won't fail me." Ramirez sighed, conceding the truth in her words. "Then we prepare," he said. "We assume they'll come at night in force, using every trick to test us. We can't underestimate them." They spent the next few hours mapping potential vulnerabilities around Emily's neighborhood: back alleys, wooded paths, and the small creek behind her house. Coda followed every movement, alert but calm, occasionally shifting his gaze to Emily as if confirming her intentions. Emily noted how quickly he read subtle cues: her breathing, the angle of her stance, the soft tone of her words. Each moment reinforced the extraordinary bond they shared, a connection that had begun as a mere curiosity, but now served as their shield and weapon. As the first hints of dawn crept across the horizon, Emily received a message that made her stomach tighten. It was an anonymous text, short and unnerving. "You can't hide, we're coming, be ready." No name, no contact information, just a chilling promise of pursuit. She showed it to Ramirez, who scanned the message and frowned deeply. "They're organized," he said, voice low. "They're tracking you, and they've already tested your boundaries." Emily's heart raced. Every instinct screamed that time was slipping away, that the chase would begin sooner than either of them had hoped. By mid-morning, Emily and Ramirez had devised a plan, a series of training exercises designed to sharpen Coda's instincts, test their coordination, and simulate real-world threats. They moved through abandoned lots, narrow streets, and dense patches of forest, each exercise pushing the limits of Coda's responsiveness. Emily's commands became subtler, more nuanced, gestures barely perceptible, tones barely audible, yet Coda obeyed flawlessly. Ramirez observed from a distance, noting how the dog's focus intensified under Emily's guidance, as if they shared a psychic channel of communication. Hours passed like minutes, and the intensity of their training began to yield results. Coda anticipated threats before they appeared, adjusted his stance with precision, and communicated intentions through a series of micro-movements Emily could read instinctively. Ramirez, despite his skepticism, was forced to acknowledge the effectiveness of their bond. "I've trained dogs for years," he said quietly, watching Emily give a barely audible command, "and I've never seen anything like this. He reads you like an extension of himself." Emily smiled faintly, a mix of pride and apprehension. She knew that the real test was still to come, the moment when instinct and danger would collide in ways they couldn't simulate. As dusk approached, the first sign of their pursuers arrived. A flicker of movement in the trees behind Emily's house caught Coda's attention immediately. His growl was low but firm, a warning that resonated in Emily's chest. She froze, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Show me," she whispered. Coda moved silently, circling, scanning, and returning a subtle nod as if confirming her assessment. From the shadows emerged two figures, masked and cautious, testing the perimeter, moving deliberately toward the house. Emily's heart pounded, but she remained calm, trusting the connection she shared with Coda. The chase had begun. The intruders split up, circling, trying to flank the house, unaware that their target was more aware than they anticipated. Emily directed Coda through a series of subtle commands, guiding his movements to intercept and distract the intruders. The dog's speed and precision were astonishing. He moved like a shadow, anticipating each step, each reaction, and neutralizing threats without aggression, using his size and presence to block and deter. Emily's instincts guided him flawlessly. their connection transforming chaos into coordinated strategy. Officer Ramirez stayed on the perimeter, communicating silently through gestures and signals. He had called for backup, but it would take time. Until then, Emily and Coda were on their own, testing the limits of their bond under real threat. The masked intruders became more aggressive, realizing they faced an opponent far more capable than expected. Yet with every advance they made, Coda countered, moving with uncanny precision, responding instantly to Emily's slightest cues. Their connection was not just communication, it was anticipation, instinct and trust made tangible. Hours passed in tense bursts, every moment a delicate dance of strategy and survival. Emily realized that the chase was more than physical, it was psychological, testing their patience, awareness, and ability to remain calm under pressure. Each time an intruder approached, Coda's subtle signals allowed Emily to act preemptively, guiding movements and avoiding direct confrontation. She marveled at the dog's intelligence, his awareness, and the depth of their shared understanding. The bond they had nurtured over weeks of training had become a lifeline, a force multiplier in the face of danger. Finally, as midnight approached, the last of the intruders retreated into the darkness, leaving Emily, Coda, and Ramirez exhausted but vigilant. The threat had been temporarily repelled, but Emily knew it was only a matter of time before more arrived, more organized, more determined, and more dangerous. The chase had begun, and there was no turning back. Emily knelt beside Coda, running her hands along his fur. "We did it," she whispered. "But this is just the beginning." Coda nudged her hand gently, eyes glowing with trust and readiness, as if affirming that together they could face anything. The night was quiet again, but Emily understood the fragile calm was temporary. Whoever had sent the warning and pursued them would return, more prepared and more ruthless. And yet, for the first time, she felt a deep, unshakable confidence. The extraordinary connection she shared with Coda was not merely a tool. It was a bond forged in trust, instinct, and shared purpose. It would guide them through the dangers ahead, illuminating a path in the darkness that no one could predict and no one could sever. The dawn of the new day was heavy with tension. Willow Creek, usually serene, seemed to hold its breath as Emily Carter and Coda prepared for what they both sensed would be the ultimate test. The warnings, the chase, the mysterious intruders, all of it had led to this moment. Emily's heart pounded, a mixture of fear and determination, but her focus remained unshakable. Coda, sensing her resolve, remained close, muscles coiled, eyes sharp and attentive. The extraordinary bond that had begun as a curiosity had now evolved into a lifeline, a connection that would determine the outcome of everything that followed. Officer Ramirez had coordinated with the local authorities and a small tactical unit, though he knew they would not fully understand what they were dealing with. The intruders were no ordinary criminals. They were organized, trained, and ruthless, motivated by knowledge of Emily's connection to Coda and its potential power. Emily reviewed the plan again, committing every detail to memory. She and Coda would act as the first line of defense, using instinct, intuition, and their extraordinary bond to outmaneuver anyone who attempted to approach. The stakes had never been higher. The morning sun rose over the trees, casting long, shifting shadows across the town. Emily, Coda, and Ramirez positioned themselves strategically near her home, monitoring entry points and blind spots. Emily's senses were heightened, every sound, every rustle, every movement amplified in her awareness. Coda mirrored her focus, shifting his stance in perfect alignment with her intentions, reading her signals before they were fully formed. The bond that had taken weeks to develop now functioned seamlessly, a conduit of instinct and strategy that neither human nor dog could replicate. Suddenly, movement in the distance caught Emily's eye. Figures emerged from the wooded edge of her property, a coordinated team of intruders, moving with precision and purpose. They had clearly learned from previous attempts, approaching silently, attempting to surround the house and cut off escape routes. Emily's breath caught in her throat, but she remained composed, drawing on the lessons she and Coda had practiced endlessly. She extended her hand slightly, a subtle gesture, and Koda moved forward, positioning himself between Emily and the approaching threat. The first intruder stepped onto the lawn, unaware of the trap being set. Koda's growl rumbled like distant thunder, low and commanding. Emily's voice, barely more than a whisper, guided him with exacting precision. The dog moved fluidly, circling, blocking, and deterring, forcing the intruder to retreat. Ramirez observed from a safe distance, taking mental notes but allowing Emily and Koda to handle the confrontation. Each intruder encountered the same barrier. Koda's presence, guided by Emily's intuition, anticipated every move, nullifying aggression without unnecessary violence. But the intruders were skilled. They split into smaller groups, attempting to flank from multiple directions. Emily's mind raced, analyzing the positions, predicting movements, and issuing commands with subtle shifts of posture and tone. Koda responded instantly, weaving between them with a grace and precision that left the intruders frustrated and confused. It was more than obedience. It was collaboration, a dance of trust, an instinct that none of the attackers could anticipate. Emily realized that their extraordinary connection was not just a tool. It was a weapon, a shield, and a strategy all at once. Amid the chaos, the hooded man from the previous encounter emerged, signaling a coordinated strike. His presence was deliberate, a test to see if Emily and Koda could handle multiple threats simultaneously. The man's movements were calculated, predicting Koda's positioning and attempting to exploit any hesitation. Emily adjusted instantly, reading the subtle shifts in his body language, guiding Koda to counter, intercept, and neutralize without confrontation. The dog moved like a shadow, his instincts perfectly attuned to Emily's intentions. Every step, every decision was a testament to the bond they shared, forged through trust, experience, and extraordinary intuition. Emily realized that this confrontation was about more than survival. It was a battle of understanding, instinct, and adaptability. The intruders' goal was clear. They wanted to capture, control, or exploit the bond she shared with Koda. But Emily refused to surrender, relying on the lessons learned, the instincts honed, and the trust built over weeks of training. Koda mirrored her resolve, moving with unwavering focus, anticipating each move, and responding with precision that left even the hooded man unsettled. Hours passed in tense bursts, the confrontation stretching like an unending test of strategy and resilience. Emily and Koda's coordination remained flawless, each subtle gesture, glance, and shift in posture translating into action. Ramirez and the tactical unit moved cautiously, providing support when needed but largely observing the extraordinary display of instinct and trust. The intruders grew increasingly frustrated, realizing that brute force, intimidation, and strategy alone could not overcome the bond between Emily and Koda. Then, as the confrontation reached its peak, Emily noticed a subtle shift in the hooded man's approach. He was no longer testing them. He was adapting, coordinating with his team to create a distraction. Two intruders attempted to approach from behind, hopping to catch Koda off guard. Emily's mind raced, and she acted without hesitation. A barely perceptible signal, a tilt of her head, a shift of her weight, directed Koda to intercept with precision. The dog moved faster than human perception, blocking the intruders and forcing them to retreat. Emily's confidence surged. Their bond was stronger than any plan, any tactic, any force arrayed against them. Finally, the hooded man stepped forward alone, his face now partially revealed, eyes sharp and calculating. He paused, recognizing that his initial strategies had failed. Emily and Koda stood firm, an unbreakable unit of trust and instinct. "This ends now," Emily said, her voice steady and commanding, carrying the authority of someone who had embraced responsibility and trust. The man hesitated, aware that further aggression would be met with flawless coordination between human and dog. Koda growled, low and unwavering, a living barrier of instinct and loyalty. After a tense silence, the man signaled a retreat. His team followed, slipping back into the shadows from which they had emerged. Emily remained alert, every nerve heightened, watching until the last figure disappeared from view. Koda relaxed slightly, sensing the immediate danger had passed, but he remained vigilant, aware that threats could return. Emily knelt beside him, running her hands along his fur, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing and drawing strength from the unspoken trust they shared. Officer Ramirez approached, a mixture of relief and awe on his face. "I've never seen anything like that," he said, voice low. "You two, you're incredible. That bond, it's unlike anything I've ever encountered." Emily smiled faintly, exhausted but resolute. "It's more than a bond," she said. "It's trust, instinct, and understanding. It's knowing each other in a way that can't be replicated or taken." Ramirez nodded, absorbing the gravity of her words. The events of the past days had revealed a connection beyond training, beyond instinct, a living partnership capable of extraordinary feats. As the sun rose higher, bathing Willow Creek in morning light, Emily reflected on everything that had transpired. The chase, the confrontation, the mysterious strangers, and the bond with Koda had all revealed a hidden depth to the world around her. She realized that the extraordinary could exist quietly, hidden beneath ordinary appearances, waiting for the right moment to surface. And in that moment, she had discovered a power rooted in trust, understanding, and unwavering instinct. The town slowly returned to its familiar rhythm, but Emily knew things would never be the same. The extraordinary events had altered her perception, sharpened her instincts, and strengthened her connection with Koda. Together, they had faced danger, adapted to threats, and emerged stronger, their bond unbroken and resilient. Emily understood that this was only the beginning. Though the immediate threat had passed, the knowledge of what was possible had opened doors to new challenges, mysteries, and discoveries. Emily stood with Koda at the edge of the park where their journey had truly begun. She looked out over Willow Creek, feeling a sense of triumph mingled with humility. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and threats beyond imagination, yet the connection between them had prevailed. Koda nudged her gently, eyes full of understanding and trust, and Emily knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, guided by instinct, intuition, and the extraordinary bond that had transformed both their lives. And so, the final confrontation ended not with victory alone, but with revelation. Emily Carter and Koda had proven that extraordinary connections could survive danger, adversity, and human ambition. They had discovered the true extent of their partnership, an unbreakable alliance rooted in trust, understanding, and instinct that no force could sever. As they walked back toward the heart of Willow Creek, the bond between them shone brighter than ever, a living testament to the extraordinary power that could emerge when human and animal worked as one.